What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again to review my division predictions from the start of the year. I'm going to do a full end-of-season power rankings along with this. Not now, definitely probably during the first round. But I got to do a review of the Hawks season. I got to do for that end of the season power rankings, even though the season's over, just to kind of see where I went wrong at the start of the year and kind of how things developed through the year. But as you see, you've got a lot of arrows on the board, some check marks, some dots if you can make those out. And what we're going to do is we have the current NHL standings, the way the season ended on the board. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through this, and we're going to see what I got right in the division predictions, what I got wrong, and so let's go through it. We're going to start off on this side with the Pacific Division. So the division went as follows: Vancouver, Edmonton, LA, Vegas, Calgary, Seattle, Anaheim, San Jose. San Jose and Anaheim were pretty easy to predict. I nailed those right off the top. For Seattle, I had them in the third spot at the start of the season. I had them in the playoffs at the third spot. That obviously was wrong. Calgary I had in the sixth spot. They missed the playoffs, so I really wasn't that far off there. Vegas I had in the fourth spot and in the playoffs. That I got correct. I expected them to be the first wild card, however, with Vancouver being the second. But we'll get to Vancouver. LA I had in second. They ended up in third. Still make the playoffs. Edmonton I had in first. They finished second. Still ended up making the playoffs. Pretty close. Vancouver was the surprise. I had them finishing fifth and in the playoffs. Instead, they finished first and in the playoffs. So, Pacific Division recap right there. Overall, it wasn't too far off, comparatively speaking, with some other divisions. We'll get to the Metropolitan in a bit. Central Division. So, Chicago and Arizona, the two bottom ones, were pretty easy for me to predict. Got those right off the bat. Then, Minnesota, who finished sixth. I had them originally finishing fourth. So I didn't have them in the playoffs. I had 5 teams in the Pacific, 3 teams in the Central. I had Minnesota finishing fourth, missing the playoffs. They finished sixth and missed the playoffs. I had St. Louis finishing third, and instead they they finished fifth. So I had them in the playoffs finishing fifth. I had them in the playoffs finishing third, but they finished fifth, did not make the playoffs, so that's a wrong there. Nashville I had in sixth. They finished fourth. I originally did not have them in the playoffs, but they did end up making the playoffs. Colorado I had finishing second. They finished third, both in the playoffs, so not too far off there. Winnipeg I had finishing fifth, and they ended up finishing second. I had them predicted out of the playoffs. They ended up making the playoffs. Dallas I nailed right off the bat. I had them winning the Western Conference, and I got that perfectly correct there. So that's 5 teams in the West that I guessed right. I believe I had 8 teams correct last year, just in the entire standing. It looks like I have 9 on the board, so improvement of 1. Atlantic Division. We got Ottawa and Montreal at the bottom. I got those right. Montreal was pretty easy. Ottawa was a bit of a gamble. Then I had then finished Buffalo. I had Buffalo finishing fourth in the wild card 2 spot. So they ended up finishing sixth. Out of the playoffs, I had them making the playoffs, of course, so a bit wrong there. Detroit, I had in sixth instead of fifth, and they did not make the playoffs. I did not have them making the playoffs anyway, so that was pretty close. Tampa finished fourth. I had them finishing second. Toronto, they were third. I had them finishing first. I had both of them in the playoffs, so it was pretty close there, 1 spot off on each. Well, not 1 spot off, 2 spots off on each going downward. Boston I had missing the playoffs because they seemed doomed for a fall-off after the fall of Bergeron and Krejci to retirement. And I had them finishing fifth. They ended up finishing second in the division. I did not have them in the playoffs. They made the playoffs. Florida I had finishing third. They ended up finishing first. Still in the playoffs, not too far off there. And then the Metropolitan Division. So, I got one thing right in this division, and that was Carolina finishing second. So, to start off there, oh boy. So, Columbus, I had them finishing sixth. They ended up finishing last. So, not really a good start there. New Jersey, I had finishing first in the division and in the playoffs. They finished seventh in the division, and definitely not in the playoffs. Philadelphia, I had finishing last, as did probably mostly everyone. and they ended up finishing 6th up to the playoff hunt until the very last bit of time there. And then Pittsburgh I had in the playoffs in the wild card 1 spot. They ended up finishing 5th, just outside the playoffs as well. So that's 2 playoff teams I had in the Metro that didn't end up making the playoffs. Capitals I had finishing 6th. They ended up finishing 4th in the playoffs. Islanders I had finishing 5th. Islanders I had finishing 5th and not in the playoffs. They ended up making the playoffs. Carolina, as we previously mentioned, got right. And then the Rangers I had finishing 3rd. And they ended up finishing 1st in the playoffs. So playoff teams I predicted correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 out of 16 teams I got in the playoffs. So that's not horrible, you could say. Of course, I messed up on Seattle, St. Louis, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and New Jersey. Those are my errors. I got 9 teams in the correct standing order, so in overall division standings. And overall, not too bad of predictions, I'd say. Comparatively speaking to last year when I only got 8 right. But it seems like things were a lot more all over the board last year. Especially with things not really changing. That kind of screwed me in the Atlantic. How Boston still ended up making the playoffs, and the top 4 teams have stayed the top 4 teams for like the past 3-4 years now. And Pacific, I was depending on Seattle staying consistent. They did not. And I depended on Winnipeg not really going that well after getting rid of Wheeler and Dubois. Instead, they did even better without them. So, yeah, that's going to be all I have for you guys in this one. Just a little recap of my predictions at the start of the year for the divisions. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.